Just like any period of time, there's always distractions for investors. And certainly we're not going to go out and make some big general platitude about this is the most difficult time to be an investor with all the uncertainty, because we could pretty much say that any given Sunday morning, because the reality is there's always uncertainty out there, and it's our perception that determines whether it is a lot of uncertainty or perhaps not as much. Well, we're going to give you some things to be thinking about for the road ahead. Some things that, themes if you will, that we think are going to be very important over the course of the rest of these 20s that have started in pretty auspicious fashion with the pandemic, and ultimately want you to be thinking about those as reasons to be an investor rather than worrying about interest rates or inflation. Or those are certainly topics du jour, but they'll change tomorrow, and certainly you want to be thinking out longer term than that. So we've got some themes that we're going to be going over, some of which you probably already know, but some of them you may not. So we'll talk about that on the program. Plus, of course, we'll talk a little bit about some of the drawbacks of just having Social Security be your sole source of income in retirement. That should be kind of self-evident there, but we got some things we want to talk about on that front. And then, of course, we got to give you the latest shifting sands on the tax front. This one just keeps getting more and more interesting. The IRS issued some guidance last year. We've got a very specific example that we want to kind of go through with folks as to how the story could change pretty dramatically on your return, depending upon how you kind of play things out. This is a year where there is so much gamesmanship that you could be playing on your tax return that I guess that means that the folks in Washington want everybody. You hear about the gamesmanship of the super wealthy. They're putting their Cayman Islands business or something like that, or their money in their Swiss bank account. Well, of course, that's all gamesmanship to avoid taxes. Well, now the game has come to you. And man, we've got a lot to talk about on this as well. So that's what we'll be chatting about here on the program. Of course, welcome to the program Dollars and Cents. We're Central Florida's longest running radio program, coming to you here on the News Radio WFLA Orlando network, along with 96.9 The Game. We also happen to be one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web. So make sure you subscribe to us on your favorite podcast channel of choice. If you want to see a video of the program as well, that of course is on our YouTube channel at Nelson Financial Planning. Normally I do this in like a tie. Today I'm just going with just a shirt and a sport coat. So a little bit more casual today on Sunday morning. And then my name, of course, Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of certified financial fiduciary stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan. So how is it that we are now the last Sunday in March? Next week, Easter, the end of the first quarter, this coming week as well on Wednesday. Hard to believe we're just sort of rolling through all of that. At last check, the broad-based markets, S&P 500, for the first quarter sitting at up about 5-6%. We'll see how the next few days go, but if you get your statements on a quarterly basis, you should be seeing some decent results, unless you're a little heavy on the large growth side of things, and that may not quite look quite as strong. That's why it's always important to kind of rebalance and make sure you've got the proper balance on that. But that's what's coming up the week ahead. The week just passed, we saw the IRS very busy with issuing out some new guidance, particularly as it relates to the taxation of your unemployment for the year 2020. If you've missed the conversations about this over the course of the past couple of weeks, listen up. If you got unemployment in the year 2020, the folks in Washington, when they passed the big stimulus bill, 1.9 trillion a couple of weeks ago. They actually made changes to the taxation of that retroactive to 2020, not effective for 2021, rather retroactive to 2020. So millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans have already filed their returns under a law that doesn't exist in the same way that it does now. So here's what it is. So unemployment, the first 10,200 of unemployment that you got in 2020 is tax-free. Based upon the latest guidance that the IRS issued this past week, here's what you've got to listen up to. The IRS actually sort of made it even more generous because they interpreted the language in the bill that passed as unclear. So if it's unclear, they chose to be a little bit more generous on their interpretation. I suppose that happens when you put together a bill in a few weeks that's spending $2 trillion. There's not going to be exactly a lot of details, or you may miss some of the finer points on how tax law in fact works. Anyway, the 10,200 is up to that limit. If you get more, then you only get if you got more unemployment, then you only get the first 10,200 of unemployment as tax free. It is per person. So if you got unemployment last year and your spouse got unemployment last year, then both of you are eligible for up to that 10,200 figure. So that could be 20,400 of tax-free income on your return that otherwise would be taxable. You can see where that would amount to a lot of money. Again, only applies to 2020. And here's the thing that is I guess odd on it. So the AGI limit is either is $150,000 regardless of the type of tax return that you are filing. So what's confusing on that is that it doesn't distinguish between single or head of household or married filing joint or married filing separately. Key distinction. There is no distinction on the income limit. It's just based upon the tax return. So there's definitely an opportunity where you can, in fact, wind up, depending upon how you are filing your tax return this year, which is not typically the case, you may very well find that you are eligible for tax-free treatment on your unemployment, where otherwise you may not be. Similarly, with this third round of stimulus as well, you may also pick up a stimulus check on that. So let me give you an example. And again, all of this is based upon the most recent IRS guidance that was issued this past week. They could very well update this, so we encourage you to always kind of check the latest information from the IRS. Obviously, our program here is a great source of that because we come to you every week in a timely fashion to describe what's going on. But here's the example that we just kind of want to walk you through here. So let's say it's a couple making $175,000, and one person makes $125,000, the other person makes $50,000. In that particular case, right, 125 and 50. That's a combined income of $175,000. If they do a joint return, then both of them are going to wind up paying tax on their unemployment because their total income was $175,000. It was $150,000, and so they would lose out. If they file a married filing separate return, the $150,000 limit applies regardless of tax returns. It's kind of one of those odd things that in the tax code, if you will. And guess what? The 10,200 and the 10,200 that each of them picked up winds up being taxable. Let me just cover that one more time. So we've got one person, $125,000, they made $125,000 and they collected $10,000 of unemployment. The other person, they made $50,000, they collected $10,000 of unemployment as well. If you put them together on a joint return, then that $20,000, 10 and 10 of unemployment is going to be taxable because their total income is above $150,000. If you separate them on a married filing separate return, poof, that $10,000 and that $10,000, that $20,000 becomes not taxable. That's a pretty big little distinction, a little finer tune. And you would think Okay, well, that's a pretty narrow exception. The reality is that millions of Americans may find themselves in exactly that situation. And typically, when you do a joint return, you don't think about doing a separate return, because most people just do a joint return, and typically there's no difference. In this particular case, there is. One other item to note on that $150,000 income limit: it does not include the amount of unemployment compensation that you got. So make sure when you're doing the numbers that you back out the unemployment compensation, because that doesn't apply to the $150,000 limit. Another piece of the guidance that the IRS issued this past week. Lots of information there, folks. Good luck navigating tax season this year. With that, we'll be back on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris on News Radio WFLA. Orlando. Of course, listening to the commercials during the commercial break, and going to see Thor tonight at the Front Yard Festival. Excited about that. We're as a family, we're kind of driving by the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center, seeing all that stuff that they've set up for the Front Yard Festival, and saying, hey, why not participate in this and have a little fun and a night out and all that good stuff. I think the weather's going to be decent enough. Hard to watch a movie outside if it's raining, but I think the weather's going to be decent enough. So we're going to Thor Ragnarok or whatever it is tonight. So not my particular choice, but hey, we're going as a family, so that should be fun. We encourage you and your family to also check it out. It should be entertaining, and they certainly are doing a lot down there. So it seems like every weekend there's always an event going on. So hey, check that on out. We're certainly doing the same this evening, at least in the Garris crew. So Thor playing tonight at the Front Yard Festival. Anyway, lots of folks are, of course, as you might well imagine, getting hung up on what's going on in the market and the level of uncertainty. As we said at the beginning of the program, there's always that, right? And sometimes it feels like that there's more, and sometimes it feels like that there is less. But the reality is, there's probably always the same amount of uncertainty. It just depends upon what we're fixating on. Today, of course, you've got the competing interests of, you've got a pandemic, right? That's still going on. The news is reporting a jump up in cases here in Florida, so that's a little disconcerting. And on the other side, you've got a bunch of stimulus money washing into the economy. Which one of those sort of competing interests ultimately determine which direction the economy and the markets are going to take? And the reality is, you've always got those kinds of things to consider. So we thought on the program today we'd spend a little bit of time of some things that you want to be thinking about as an investor. And when we talk about as an investor, we're not talking about someone who's looking to get a particular performance over the course of the next week or month or quarter or even year. But as an investor, your perspective really should be over a period of years. So you want to be looking out on the trends that potentially would occur over the course of the next decade. And certainly I think there's some trends out there that speak volumes to the potential for opportunity. The potential for opportunity of our economy, the potential for opportunity of us as Americans to ultimately continue on this, what is unique to America, this constructive, destructive process of our economy, right? Like, our government, our system here is not set up to support industries that have fallen behind, that have ultimately aren't producing things as effectively or efficiently or as desirable as what somebody else can do, right? I mean, our system of government was not set up to save the buggy manufacturer. When the cars came on board, those buggy manufacturers went out of business, and that's the process. And you see that time and time again, right? Sears is out of business, effectively out of business, because of the likes of Walmart, Amazon, and the like. That's our economy. That's how it works. That's what makes it one of the most dynamic economic engines on the planet. So think of that in that respect. If you're out there and you're struggling with, oh, I've got a bunch of cash, and what do I do with it, and what about this, what about that? I think the answer is there's never going to be a perfect time. There's never a perfect time to invest. Let me know when you get an engraved invitation that says you need to invest in the last week of March, Monday, tomorrow, because you're never going to get that. And so the reality is that if you're stuck with a high level of cash, which I know a lot of folks are, and you're trying to figure out what to do with it, because obviously you're not making any money in a savings account, then these are the themes that you want to be thinking about. And in particular, when you have that as a way to sort of get invested, I think it's important to think about putting a little bit of money in over time. Dollar cost averaging, which is what that concept is, putting a little bit of money in each and every month on a consistent basis. That's a great way to smooth out any potential volatility in the market. So think about that as the approach to tie in well with these themes. So let's talk about kind of one of the biggest things, obviously, that's front and center, and that, of course, is COVID. And there's some suggestion that this disease, COVID, the pandemic, which is a period of extreme adversity, in fact spurs innovation and winds up spurring innovation and ultimately a high level of behavioral change, not unlike what happened in Pearl Harbor. So there could very well be some similarities, not obviously the devastation of war and things like that, but it just, if you think about it in terms of extreme adversity, innovation, and behavioral change. So if you look at when, for example, Pearl Harbor happened, 3/4 of the U.S. artillery was horse-drawn. Stop and think about that. Pearl Harbor happened, 3/4 of the U.S. artillery was horse-drawn. Kind of crazy, right? By the end of the year, we had entered the atomic age. Period of extreme adversity, spurring innovation and spurring behavioral change that led to growth for many decades. Now, by no stretch of the imagination do I think these are the same events. Tragedy of Pearl Harbor. In contrast, a lot of people are experiencing a lot of tragedy with COVID. So some interesting sort of parallels, if you will, that you could potentially be thinking about. Because what happened, right? I mean, if you think about the period of innovation that was sparked post Pearl Harbor, what have we already seen with COVID, right? You've seen a incredibly rapid development of vaccines. I mean, here we are, we got 20 to 25% of the population already vaccinated, and we're this is almost exactly 1 year ago that everything started shutting down as a result of it. That's an incredible development, and one that I don't think we appreciate. I think we've sort of taken for granted, but to have that development happen within a year, that's just unbelievable. And then when you think about the economy and its functionality and in this rapid embrace of tech and remote working and online retail, I mean, these are typically trends that typically would take years to sort of develop that happen in months. And so, you stop and think about what we've experienced just in the past 12 months, setting aside the event, but looking at it more from a technology and innovation and behavioral change side of things. That's a tremendous amount of innovation to develop vaccines all over the world within that short period of time. That's a tremendous amount of innovation for businesses to pivot from having people in a location to everybody at their homes and effectively working as efficiently and effectively as they were. And it certainly wasn't without some bumps, I mean, absolutely. But those are some significant behavioral changes and innovative changes that typically would have taken many, many years to come. So again, a crisis like COVID, a crisis like Pearl Harbor spurred a tremendous amount of change and a tremendous amount of innovation that lasted for a long period of time. So be thinking about that when it comes to thinking about your investments and your investment strategy. Sitting in cash is not going to allow you to experience any of those phenomenal technological innovations and behavioral changes that we've already seen happen dramatically over the course of the past year. Speaking of cash cash may very well continue to be a more and more endangered species. Now, be careful about this one, because I think when people talk about becoming a cashless society, they equate that to being a dollar-less society, and that's not the case at all. The United States dollar is still very much the world's currency. If anything, the pandemic only strengthened the position of the US dollar and the Federal Reserve as the world's bank. And the reality is, because when the Federal Reserve went out and got into the treasury markets and got into the bond markets and all of that to with its quantitative easing to support interest rates or push interest rates down or keep them down as low as possible, that ultimately helped the global economy continue to stay on at least the footing that it stayed on. And so the US dollar, still the 800-pound gorilla. Don't think that that's going to disappear at all. The reality is that what we talk about when we talk about a cashless society is this concept of digital payments. Tap, swipe, go. All of that stuff, that is digital payment. That is more of a cashless society. And it's interesting when you look at the numbers. It's the fascinating thing about this, not using cash. Emerging markets, so think places like India, Africa, places like that. Emerging markets are way ahead of the US on that, because the reality is you don't have a local bank on your corner in India or in Africa or wherever. So the reality is that there's no banks, but everybody has phones. And nothing struck me more than probably, what was that, 10 years ago? Maybe even longer ago, when we were in Africa. And you see these Maasai warriors all dressed in red, and they're doing their thing, and they all have a cell phone on their belt. They don't have running water, don't have plumbing, but they all got a cell phone. And what that cell phone enables you to do is it allows you to transact. It allows you to become a member of the economy and transact in commerce. So that's the role of that. In just 5 years, number of digital payment transactions has tripled from 100 billion to 300 billion. So something to certainly think about there. We got more on this stuff. Got a few more we want to kind of share with you, some things to be thinking about as you think about investing and the future ahead. All that coming up here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris, Nelson Financial Planning on News Radio WFLA Orlando. On the program today, we're talking about some themes to be thinking about if you are an investor, or if you're someone who wants to be an investor and you're sitting there with cash and you're trying to figure out, well, so much uncertainty, there's always uncertainty, and what are some of the things that I should be kind of thinking about that might encourage me to say, okay, the world 10 years from now is going to look very different. How do I participate in that? How do I look at those trends that are certainly going to continue to develop over the course of the next few years and use those as sort of foundational pieces for how I am investing money? And we talked a little bit about a couple of them. The first, of course, is COVID. Is COVID going to be a period where extreme adversity hits society and that ultimately spurs innovation and behavioral change? Not unlike Pearl Harbor. When you think of the fact that when Pearl Harbor happened, 3/4 of the US artillery was horse-drawn, and then by the end of that we were in the atomic age. Periods of extreme adversity have a tendency to spur innovation and behavioral change. Just think of where we're at just a year into this. First of all, we already got 25% of the population vaccinated. That's an incredible feat within an incredibly short period of time. Everybody's working from home. Everybody's doing things online. I mean, it almost as a seamless transition, but not really seamless. There was a lot of bumps along the way. That period of time spurred or compressed the timetables of these trends that were percolating out there into months instead of years. You can think of the same thing when you kind of look at global financial transactions, digital payment transactions, as you move more to a cashless, not dollarless, don't confuse the two, a cashless society where it's more swipe, tap, go, use the phone, click, there, you're off, and that's that. That's another sort of amazing trend. So we got a few more that we want to share with you here on the program. Welcome, of course, back to Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. My name is Joel Garris, certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of certified financial fiduciary stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan. So another fascinating development, right, in the world of pharmaceuticals is this notion of continuing to see improvement in cancer care. It really is amazing between cell therapy, early diagnosis, and all of the suite of newer drugs that are out there that ultimately could be a big driver of what goes on in the pharmaceutical industry. Certainly some exciting developments with cancer treatment, and it's great to see the results of all of those sort of happening along the way. So just think of how much progress has been made on that front just over the course of the past few years. Think about what might happen over the course of the next few. Some exciting development, certainly when it comes to pharmaceuticals and cancer. And certainly all the pharmaceutical companies certainly rescued themselves pretty well by developing the vaccine. At multiple companies have developed the vaccine, and they've done that in a record time. I think that probably takes the heat off of them from a government regulatory perspective anytime soon, given how quickly they were to be able to develop things. And I guess that's, when you think about healthcare, and the innovation, you saw during the course of COVID a broader acceptance to telehealth appointments, right? I mean, it's amazing how those have become a part of society, where you take a little bit of a trend that was happening before the pandemic, and it's dramatically accelerated. I was with my mom this past week, and actually wound up kind of doing a telehealth appointment, and it just works, right? You don't even have to leave the house. That's a much greater efficiency and easier access to a doctor's expertise. If you think back, the old Star Trek movie where you had the tricorder, right? So the tricorder was the handheld medical device that scanned the body, right? Got your vital signs, issued a diagnosis, and prescribed treatment all within minutes. That was the tricorder. If you think of the old Star Trek stuff. We might be getting closer to that, if you think about that, right? Those devices are coming. If you talk to anybody that's been on a heart monitor or a sleeping monitor or diabetes or heart, there's been 29% annual growth on this stuff over the course of the past five years, and it's expected that growth rate will continue going forward. So certainly some pretty exciting things when you think about healthcare and the developments there. I am of a certain age, over 50, and one of the things that your doctor should be asking you about if you're over 50 is the infamous colonoscopy. Well, we had the conversation here about, what was that, back in January, and he's like, well, you're not really at risk, but here, you should do the Cologuard. And the Cologuard is you get a box delivered to the house. Now, I haven't opened the box. It's been sitting there by the door for about a month. But basically, Cologuard, right, is something that you would do at home. So you can kind of figure out what that process is. I haven't opened the box to determine that, but I'm pretty sure that's what the process is. Whereby a colonoscopy, right, you're basically, it's not general anesthesia, but you're pretty knocked out. And the risks of getting your colon pierced by the machine as it's going up, there's definitely that risk. And now you get a box at the house, and you can just deal with it at the house. That's a pretty significant development if you stop and think about that. That improves early detection, that improves efficient treatment, and all of those things are pretty dramatic. And if you get early detection, then obviously you don't have extensive treatment. Renewable energy, obviously current administration, right? That's a big priority. Besides the current administration, I think there were already a lot of tailwinds in this sector, particularly when you look and think about automation and you think about artificial intelligence, where and again, artificial intelligence is just simply another word for looking at a bunch of data and drawing conclusions from it. And that is certainly the case where that has allowed the costs to come down and productivity and efficiency to be boosted when it comes to energy power, renewable energy power, those kinds of things. So 30 years from now, it's widely projected that solar and wind, because of these developments, are expected to account for about 40% of the world's power generation. So amazing stuff there. Same thing, right? Electric and autonomous vehicles. Next decade, they expect that there to be a 28% annualized growth for electric vehicle fleet worldwide. So next decade, 28% per year is the expected growth. And if you think of that obviously 28%, that's a pretty big number. If you think ahead to 2030, you can see where, particularly in major cities, where you've got fleets of autonomous electric vehicles operating, and that really allows the personal vehicle that no longer really needed as a necessary or as a primary form of transportation, particularly in most major cities. And so when you think about that, that obviously has a positive impact on global emissions as well. It takes a lot to produce a car. It's a pretty manufacturing intensive process, and so if you don't have as many cars because you've got more autonomous or electric vehicle fleets, then that obviously changes things dramatically as well. What won't change over the course of the next many years is the keys to successful investing, right? Being consistent, being diversified, and investing money on a regular basis. So keep those themes in mind as you think about how to improve or start being an investor and looking ahead to the next few years. So we're going to wrap it up and take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Social Security here on the program next on Dollars and Cents. Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Sunday morning. This is, of course, Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. My name is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of certified financial fiduciaries stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan that produces superior investment results and provides you with peace of mind for the future. So on this segment of the program, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the drawbacks to relying just on Social Security. It should be pretty self-evident, but we want to take this segment to really drive that point home, because certainly Social Security is an important source of income in retirement, but if you're planning to rely on that solely as your sole source of income in retirement, well, there's going to be some drawbacks to that. Starting off with the fact that it's not going to be that much money. The average benefit for a Social Security recipient in the year 2021, $1,543 per month. That, from perspective purposes, is sort of just above the federal poverty line. And at the end of the day, Social Security only intended to be a replacement of about 40% of income, sort of one leg of the three-legged stool as it was originally described. The other two legs on that, so Social Security, your pension, and your savings. Problem is, one of those legs has kind of gotten chopped off, and it's not the Social Security one, it's the pension one. Most employers or employees don't have that option through their employer, so you better be boosting the retirement savings side of that equation, because one of those three is pretty much not existent anymore. So important to realize just how much or how little Social Security in fact provides to the average American. So the numbers are relatively low. The average amount, as we said, just about the federal poverty line, which obviously no one really plans to be living at that in retirement. So that's number one. Number two, the buying power of Social Security ultimately falls over time, right? I mean, yeah, there's a COLA in there, but we've talked about this before. The COLA for Social Security really doesn't reflect the rising costs for the age group over age 65, because the age group over age 65 typically consumes a higher level of healthcare resources, right? And so what that means is that they're seeing a higher rate of inflation than, say, someone in their 20s or 30s that don't consume as high a level of medical costs. So it's certainly important to recognize that inflation is certainly there, particularly more for the age group over 65. And yeah, the COLA helps a little bit, but doesn't help nearly as much, because if you're over age 65, you're seeing that more of what you use your dollars on is in fact increasing in cost at a higher clip than other parts of what you would spend money on. So if you think of that, your true buying power, if you will, has fallen by 30% during the course of the past 20 years. In the past 20 years, we've actually had relatively tame inflation. So if you're still lost about a third of your purchasing power over the past 20 years when inflation was relatively tame, imagine how much buying power you're going to lose if inflation just trickles up just a little bit. So beware of the impact that inflation is going to have over time. The COLA just does not keep up. Ask anybody on Social Security how much that COLA really is, and they'll tell you it doesn't really keep up. The other issue, of course, relying on Social Security is and we're not about ready to launch into a fact that it's not going to be there or something like that. It will be there in some form and fashion, but understand that your retirement security, if you're collecting Social Security solely in retirement, depends on what your government does. And certainly Social Security not going bankrupt despite but it certainly faces some financial issues. And so how do you shore it up? Does that mean you're going to wind up with less benefits? Does that mean you're going to have to sort of live longer and age more in order to get those benefits? So that may have to be a part of it, right? At the end of the day, you may have to wait longer to retire. Yeah, you can collect at 62, but the full retirement age being moved from 65 to 67 means that you're getting a significantly more of a reduction if you are taking it early when the full retirement age was at 65 versus at age 67. It's the difference between 20% versus a 33% reduction now based upon them just moving that full retirement age. So be aware that if you're relying on Social Security, there's a lot of things that you can't control, and these would certainly be one of these. So anyway, we're going to wrap it on up and get on out of here. Have a wonderful Sunday. Like I said, we're going to the Front Yard Festival. We're going to see Thor tonight with the kids, so that should be fun. You've been listening to Dollars and Cents with Joel Garrison, Nelson Financial Plan, News Radio, WFLA, Orlando.